A team of United Nations experts reported on Monday there were reasonable grounds to believe sexual violence by Hamas militants, including rape and gang rape, took place during their October 7th attack on Israel. UN Special Envoy for Sexual Violence in Conflict, Pramila Patten, led the team.
In most of these incidents, victims were first subjected to rape and then killed, and at least 2 incidents relate to the rape of women's corpses.
Patten's group published a 24-page report after visiting Israel earlier this year to verify information gathered on sexual violence linked to the Hamas attack. It described finding credible circumstantial information that pointed to acts such as genital mutilation and sexualized torture. Hamas has repeatedly rejected accusations of sexual violence, but the UN team said evidence showed some of the hostages that militants seized to Gaza had also suffered sexual violence and voiced concern for those who remain there.
We found clear and convincing information that sexual violence, including rape, sexualized torture, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, has been committed against captives. And we also have reasonable grounds to believe that such violence may still be ongoing against those still held in captivity.
Here, Patten underlined the need for the war to stop.
I pause and must add that I am of the strong opinion that this finding does not in any way legitimize further violence, but actually reinforces the need for an urgent ceasefire.
Her team said they also received information about sexual violence against Palestinian men and women in Israeli detention centers during house raids and at checkpoints after October the 7th. They said they raised the allegations with the Israeli authorities, who responded saying they had received no such complaints against the Israeli Defense Forces. Patten stressed the team's mission in Israel was not investigative in nature and said a fully fledged probe would be required to establish the overall magnitude, scope, and specific attribution for the sexual violence. Their report made several recommendations, including for the Israeli government to grant access to UN and independent agencies for such investigations, as well as to work with the Special Envoy's office on addressing conflict-related sexual violence. They also pressed Hamas to release all those still in captivity while ensuring their protection, including from sexual violence.
We at the Association of the Rape Crisis Centers in Israel were very happy to read the report that was written by Pramila Patten from the UN. Actually, this is the first time that an international body acknowledges what has happened in Israel. There's a big denial in the world that sexual violence was used as a weapon of war. There's a horrible denial that Hamas terrorists actually raped, gang raped, and mutilated women and men. And this is the first time the big wide world is seeing that this is a fact, a horrific, horrible fact. I have met with the team of Pramila Patten for several times. I was really impressed by this dedicated group of women that I have met who really are experts in the field of sexual trauma. And as I felt, they came to Israel to do serious research and to find out what has happened. And when we met them, we gave them information and helped them with all the things that we could help, which still, as being the Association of Rape Crisis Centers, our main motive and our main agenda is to keep the privacy of victims. Otherwise, we could not do our work. But in the limits of our work, we try to help and to give all the information we have about what has happened and about information we have about survivors of this horrific, horrible slaughter.
we also found that there are reasonable grounds to believe that conflict-related sexual violence, including rape and gang rape, occurred during the 7th of October attacks in at least 3 locations, namely the Nova Music Festival site and its surroundings, Road 232, and Kibbutz Reim. And in most of these incidents, victims were first subjected to rape and then killed, and at least 2 incidents relate to the rape of women's corpses. With regard to the hostages taken to Gaza, we found clear and convincing information that sexual violence, including rape, sexualized torture, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, has been committed against captives. And we also have reasonable grounds to believe that such violence may still be ongoing against those still held in captivity. Across multiple locations, we found a recurring pattern of victims found fully or partially undressed, bound and shot. And we found that although circumstantial, such a pattern may be indicative of some forms of sexual violence, including sexualized torture, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. Some allegations of sexual violence previously reported and highly publicized in the media were determined by us to be unfounded. And I'm here, I'll just give one example, referring to the allegation of a pregnant woman whose womb had reportedly been ripped open before she was killed, with her fetus stabbed while still inside her. Coming to my visit to the occupied West Bank, with regard to that visit, whose purpose was different, considering that we have UN-verified information on conflict-related sexual violence, which will be, as I mentioned, included in the annual report of the Secretary General, we nevertheless received, whilst there, from several interlocutors, information about cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment of Palestinians, men and women in detention, also under the administrative detention, including sexual violence in the forms of invasive body searches, threats of rape, and prolonged forced nudity. Concerns were also raised about disproportionate physical and sexual violence, including sexual harassment and threats of rape during house raids, including at night and at checkpoints. And how did we draw our conclusion? We base it on our own assessment of the credibility and reliability of the witnesses that we met. But we also verified the sources, cross-referenced the relevant material and information, and assessing whether in all the circumstances that there was sufficient, credible, and reliable information to make a finding. The team reviewed over 5,000 photographic images and some 50 hours of footage of the attacks, provided partly by various state agencies, but also through our own independent online review of various open sources. Though I must add that we found the material provided by the national agencies to be authentic and unmanipulated. And a lot of those footage was captured through militants' body cams and dash cams, individual cell phone, CCTV, and traffic surveillance cameras. Coming back to the fact that the mandate is not investigative in nature, and that the purpose of the mission was to gather, analyze, and verify information for its potential inclusion in reporting to the Security Council.